Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Meg Gardiner. Meg is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 16 novels. Her thrillers have won the Edgar Award and been summer reading picks by The Today Show and the Oprah magazine. In August 2022, Heat 2, co-authored with Michael Mann, debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. A former lawyer, 2-time president of Mystery Writers of America, and 3-time Jeopardy champion, Meg lives in Austin, Texas. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you, Danielle. It's wonderful to have a chance to chat with you.
Oh my God, it's so fun to chat with you. And Austin is on my short list, so I'm going to make my way down there. But today I want to talk about the Unsub series and the latest Shadowheart, which I just devoured. So tell our listeners about Shadowheart.
Shadowheart is #4 in the Unsub series about Caitlin Hendricks, who is an FBI profiler who hunts serial predators. And in this novel, she discovers that 2 serial killers have started up some kind of bizarre competition with each other. One is in prison, the other seems to be copycatting him, and it's up to her to dive into 2 very deep, dark minds, figure out what their connection is, who their targets are, and what's going on before anybody else gets taken.
So this is like you said, the 4th story, and I followed the Unsub series and Caitlin from the beginning, and we won't give any spoilers. There's some really interesting. She has a very interesting background. If people want to start, I think you can absolutely read this as a standalone, which I love a series that does that. But I do also think that the beginning of this book, Unsub, which is on your wall back there because it won the Edgar Award, is a fabulous.
And Unsub won the Barry Award.
Oh, the Barry Award. Sorry.
That's okay. I don't mean to be bragging on it, but I'll be
many awards, Meg. So many awards. It's just, but no, you're right. I'm sorry. That is exactly what it won, the Barry Award. Something else won the Edgar. Which one won the Edgar?
China Lake.
Okay. So yeah, Meg is obviously incredibly talented and a multi-award winner, as well as being the #1 New York Times. We should brag. We have to brag, Meg. We spend so much of our year like in a hole doing this, right? Then we get to brag.
Absolutely right.
We're bragging on Meg.
Show off your books. Show off that beautiful bookcase behind you.
I do love my bookcase too. I'm always here. Danielle's books are always in the background, but I do think that the Caitlin story is really fantastic, and Unsub is a wonderful way to start. So either way, people can do whichever they want. But tell us, do you remember? And this is always a fun question to ask, and some writers go, "Oh, I don't know if I do remember," but how Caitlin came to be and how the series started for you.
I was thinking about the Zodiac, as one does when one's a thriller author sometimes. I grew up in Southern California and remember my parents being alarmed by this person out there seeing a picture in the newspaper, a police drawing of this terrifying person wearing a hood with the Zodiac symbol on it, and asking who that was, and having my father go white and try to explain to me what a serial killer was. And the Zodiac was never captured. He's an unknown subject, which is where the title of the book and series comes from. That's what the FBI calls the case when it's an actual whodunit. They don't have the identity of the perpetrator. And I thought, okay, the Zodiac stopped. The Zodiac went silent, but was never identified, never captured, could still be out there. And I thought, what is there to keep this person from picking up where he left off? So that was the genesis of the story. And in Unsub, the killer picks up after 20 years. Yeah. And I thought, how do you tell a story that crosses generations? And I thought, well, that's by having the investigator be the daughter of the original homicide cop who tried to break the case, could not break the case. Instead, the case broke him. So Caitlin has grown up as a cop with her father failing to catch an infamous serial killer in the Bay Area. And when that killer starts up again, she's not going to let the case go to anybody else but her.
Right.
So that was the genesis of that. And then as the series goes on, she's recruited to the FBI. She is unsurprisingly driven, feels a huge weight of responsibility, always, needs to remind herself that it's not all on her shoulders to solve the problems of the world. One thing I decided about the series is that each of the books has a real crime at a kernel of the real crime at its heart. So there's a sense of authenticity. There was the Zodiac and Unsub. A second book has a Ted Bundy-like character. The third one is the Night Stalker, and in this one, in Shadowheart, the convicted murderer from Judah Good draws pictures, makes drawings of the women he says he's killed, and I got that horrifying idea from Sam Little, who started drawing pictures of dozens of women he said he'd killed over decades, traveling across the United States. So on that happy idea.
Well, I mean, so let's talk about this. It's interesting that you have the memory of when your dad tried to explain what a serial killer was. Do you feel like that there was as a kid, there was some sort of curiosity? Like I always sort of wonder how we became thriller authors versus why don't we write romance, Meg? That's what I want to know.
Well, I tried to write a romance. I don't know about you. Once I think I was a teenager when I thought I knew it all.
Yeah.
I tried to write a romance, and it ended up with like a bunch of like deaths. So I think I decided
you're like, clearly I'm not a romance writer. I like to see people die too much.
Go where the story's leading me here, but no, as a kid, the idea of a serial killer shocked me because, I mean, at the time I went to Catholic school, we were taught that there's sin, but that people, fall prey to the deadly sins, greed, lust, sloth, gluttony, right, all that. But when I said, why is this Zodiac person killing people? Thinking like he's going to come up with something that makes sense to me. And my dad said, there is no reason, he likes to do it. And that just kind of like knocked a few pins out from under my perception of the world and the way things worked. So, it was probably deeply scary for me to think about that. And as I turned into a thriller author, I thought, well, what scares me? And how can I turn that into a story that will grip readers? Because in a story, we can have our characters be threatened, find chaos crash into their world, and have them need to throw everything they have at it. But they're trying to find the truth, and in stories, they can.
Yes, exactly. There's no unsolved.
They can find justice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate that because I think that something about the stakes, right? For me, it's about the stakes of life and death. Like, a romance is, the stakes are love. And, obviously that's an important stake too, but there's nothing that compares with life and death, and nothing that compares with like the moment. And this one has a wonderful, your book, Shadowheart, has a fabulous ending where there's this incredible high octane chase. I'm not going to say anything.
You're not spoiling things by saying that there are high octane moments in a Meg Gardiner book. That's what I like to read, and I love to make sure that there is always something of that in one of my books, because
it is there in spades in this one, and I absolutely love it. So let's talk about this because Caitlin has changed jobs. Obviously, she was in the Bay Area, now she's in Virginia, and her boyfriend, who's super cute, he's in a different, he's an ATF, right?
Correct. They're both feds, G-man and G-woman. Yeah,
I love it. So, so what do you do for research? Do you have people that you call? How do you sort of know the ins and outs? Because there's terminology in the book, I think, that's probably, I'm sure it's accurate, and it's probably sort of newer stuff than when I wrote a serial killer book, which was a long, long time ago. So, what do you do for research?
A lot of reading. I mean, there are former FBI agents, both who were in the behavioral analysis unit. The Mindhunter story that, John Douglas has written a number of books, and that's always a good place to start for anybody who is curious about it. I have attended a number of seminars given by the FBI and the ATF for writers, actually.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, they will. Of course, they want to see their agencies portrayed accurately, favorably.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, having a day where they have agents come and talk about the actual work they do and present cases and show how those cases were worked is absolutely fascinating. And
I'll bet. Do you do that? Do they come to you in Austin, or
No, I've done that in New York a couple of times, actually. The FBI did a day, a couple of times they did a day for thriller writers as part of Thriller Fest. Which
I love that. So those of you who don't know, Thriller Fest is a conference at the very end of May, early June, that is sort of the international thriller writers, and we all come to New York and take over a hotel and talk murder. It's very, very fun. Lots of panels. If you're in the area, I'm sure you can check it out, Thriller Fest. Google that, and that's a really fun thing to do. And I actually, now that I'm thinking about Thriller Fest, there's also the master classes at Thriller Fest where you can go and practice your craft. And a few years back at my first Thriller Fest, actually, Meg was my teacher.
That's where we met. And it was so extraordinary because you were already such an accomplished author. And I thought, wow.
It was so fun. I was like,
what are you hoping to find out in this class?
I learned quite a lot, Meg, and you're a wonderful teacher. So I was definitely just looking to sort of further my craft, and I saw you were teaching, and I was like, I would love to work with Meg. So that was where we met, and then we had dinner, and it was really fun. But that was that's a fabulous other aspect, and that is generally right. It's for people who haven't been published, but I had sold some books, but it was really, I feel like you can never stop. You can never stop learning, and somebody else's perspective is always fun.
Absolutely.
So do you enjoy the research? Is that part of the fun for you?
I do. And you mentioned that terminology has changed, ideas have changed. You can find out a lot actually just on the FBI website. There's a whole just like trove of data explaining a lot of these terms and how they look at it, and research papers that agents have published talking about, the different way they now look at unsubs and how they no longer really use the like the big division between organized
killers versus disorganized killers.
That there's a more nuanced take on it now. So it's easy. I love research. I don't know about you. It's wonderful.
That's so fun. I do not love research. I definitely know it's important and I do it, but I'm not the one who gets down the rabbit hole. And I know, like, you talk about that, Lisa Gardner talks about that. A lot of people love research, and it's, and also it doesn't surprise me because I feel like, having been an attorney, you're like probably really good at it, right?
Well, yeah, but you have to know how deep in the rabbit hole you are so that you can pull yourself out and say, okay, it's really time to write. But I mean, I'm not a journalist. Some people love just to go out and meet people and ask questions, which is always, I would say, the top way to learn about a job and the people who do it is really to talk to them and just try to get into their world and see what it's actually like. And it was actually not for the Unsub series, but one of the best research experiences I had was meeting with the pararescuemen from the California Air National Guard, who are do search and rescue and combat search and rescue. And because there's a character in the Joe Beckett series he's a PJ, and just meeting with these guys was
and a PJ is a parachute jumper.
Pararescue. They call them pararescue jumpers, but now their official title is pararescuemen because they jump out of airplanes.
Right.
They parachute. They ride jet skis. They ride. They ski. They rappel. Wow. They do all this stuff, and they're all young and fit, and like they go climb El Capitan on the weekend to unwind. And it was they're just all really great guys who get no attention, really.
I know, right.
So they were appreciative.
I think in general, like I have found the times I've spoken to real humans in these jobs, they are really grateful for people asking about their work. And like you said, like, I mean, obviously there's two sides of the police debate, but most of the people, I mean, all the people I have spoken to personally are amazing and dedicated to their jobs and working really, really hard in a really hard job. Like it's the hardest. It feels like a really, really hard job. So
very much. Yeah. And I have gone on ride-alongs a couple of times in
yeah,
Austin and in Los Angeles too. Yeah.
That's fun too. So you've written both, standalones and series. Is, how do they feel? How does that feel different as a writer?
Well, no, it's an interesting question because I love writing series because then every time you start a new book, they're your friends.
Mhm.
You've created them to be your friends, but they're the people you know their world. I think most writers, if we start a series, it's because we think there are a number of stories that these characters could tell. So here you are again, like, okay, I get to jump back into this person's life, this world, find out and figure out what's the same, what's new. You don't need to set up a whole new world with in a series, but sometimes we get an idea that doesn't fit with the series, and it's a big idea and it's self-contained, and you need a different set of characters who are going to be living it, and that's when a standalone is really big and juicy and fun.
And did you knew that the Unsub was going to be a series when you wrote that book?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was. Yeah, I wrote. I thought, okay, this is going to be the first time I'm writing about a character who is in law enforcement.
Yeah,
that gives her reason. She is an investigator, so
right. Versus
we'll have cases plural.
Yeah, right. Versus the poor, like Angela Lansbury, who just always is surrounded by murder, but she's like a normal human. I agree. That is what I've had situations where I finished a book that I thought was a standalone, and the publisher says, "Oh, this would be great as a series," and then you sort of have to step back and tweak the ending and rethink because you can't, I don't think you can finish a book as a standalone and then just pop it out as a series. You have to, because it requires you to think about what the arc of the whole thing will be, right?
Correct. And
Or
that
at
was
least some part of it.
Yeah. And how did it work out for you?
Oh, I mean, it was great, but I did have to rethink the ending. And I think that's when do you have a sense for like how long the series might be? I mean, how do you just one at a time?
Exactly. Yeah. And it was, but you point out you sometimes you need to tweak, or as in my case, after my first novel was just about to be published and had gone to print, then the editor then said, how about a sequel? I'm like, of course. And they're like, what the hell? What am I going to do?
Exactly.
And then you're looking back at these characters, and later on you go like, why did I do that? Why did I, that?
Well,
and how long can I go on with a character who's not in law enforcement, and all this terrible stuff just keeps, seeming to happen? So.
Yes, it is. It is a very unfortunate situation for those characters, but it's also fun to read about, people that are normal people. So it's a fun balance, and I think we are writing fiction, right? People have to sort of be open to the idea that it's not 100%, believable in the sense that this person's going to go through all this trauma, but that the story itself is believable, and that's what we're set into reality and authenticity, and that's what we have to come back for. I do think people get a little sticklerish about certain things, and you're like, yeah, of course it doesn't make sense. This person wouldn't, no human would survive this many, attacks on their life if they didn't have a lot of training. So of course, but why we read for fun, right? So speaking of that, tell us about the experience of writing Heat 2. This was your first co-authored project, and you worked with Michael Mann, which must have been amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what it was like?
Oh, sure. Heat 2, which is a both prequel and sequel to the film Heat. As I hope everybody knows, the 1995 crime epic, classic film starring Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer, Natalie Portman.
So
about a master thief and the detective who is hunting him through the streets of Los Angeles. And I had never collaborated on a project, but I was immediately open to it, and mostly because when Michael Mann calls,
yeah, right, you're like, sure,
says you want to co-write a book with me, I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, this sounds daunting.
Yeah,
and a huge responsibility. But the little devil on my shoulder goes, so come on, you've always wanted to write a heist novel. And when was I ever going to get a chance to do it at such a spectacular level? So I just threw myself on the project like a paratrooper leaping out of the plane, one of those PJs out the back of it.
And how did you guys do it? Did you sort of write and then send it back and forth, or is that how you did it?
When we first started talking about it, it was during COVID, the worst of COVID. So it was all by phone. So it was like talk on the phone for a couple of hours, work up an outline, send that off, send ideas back. And Michael had been thinking about this for a long time, and he is an extraordinarily accomplished writer himself. He wrote the screenplay for Heat and has written a lot of other screenplays. He had collaborated on screenplays before, but he had never written a novel. And he was wise enough to want someone who had experience in the novel form.
Right, because that's very different, right?
It's very, very different. So he had some of the big concepts for the sections of the book. The prequel section, he knew he wanted a lot of it to take place in Chicago, and that there would be, the Hannah the cop would be hunting a home invasion crew, that Macaulay, the bank robber, would be pulling a tunnel heist, and that later on there would be like that would lead to another bigger heist on the border. And then afterwards he wanted to go forward and see what happened to the characters who, shall we say, survive Heat.
Exactly.
They go, and how their lives develop in the next, over the next decade. So we worked back and forth on an outline, and then I realized, I said, he's either going to like my writing or he's not. So I said, why don't I write the first few chapters and see what you think? Because I thought we need to know immediately if it's not going to work. But fortunately, he did.
Well, and I'm sure he didn't call you randomly, right?
No. Our agent put us, my literary agent put us together and said, see what you guys think. So we said, yeah, we're going to do it. And then as the book developed, we would each write, like one of us would write a chunk, send it off, it'd come back with completely rewritten and new stuff added. And then as it went on, everything just became more and more enmeshed. I don't know how other writing teams work. I know there are so many different ways that people go at it, but we kind of started off a little bit separately, but by the time we were finishing it up and polishing it, we were passing, we were shipping chapters back and forth, or scenes or pages, or like texting paragraphs to each other, which, probably wasn't the best document control we could have handled.
It sounds like what a fun project for the pandemic, when we were all so isolated anyway, right? It gave you a sort of like a constant, interactions with somebody who didn't live in the same four walls that you did, which had to have been
and then
nice.
we were able to get together. Finally, I went to Los Angeles for a week, and we sat across the desk and just like hashed out all the revisions and the next the next draft, which was great, because that took, we got done in 5 days what it probably would have taken a couple of months to do virtually. So it was great. It was a really exhilarating experience, really challenging. It was a lot of hard work, but I found it really elevating and wonderful to work with someone whose work wasn't exactly in the lane that I tended to be writing in. It was broader, which I thought was exactly what was a perfect opportunity for me to do something new, something bigger, this massive, my books tend to take place in a very narrow time frame, which as the movie Heat did, is only over a period of a few weeks. But this book spans decades. So that
Right.
was, learning how to do that was very exciting as well. But I'm thrilled. I was feeling like this was going to be something very special, and I hope that readers would think it was, and they have.
It's so exciting. So this is so exciting about Heat 2. When, I assume the movie is in the works. Who's working on that?
That ball is in Michael's court. You would not be surprised to hear that Michael Mann would love to make Heat 2 into a movie. So,
Well, I'll look forward to that. That is so exciting. And congratulations. And I love the idea of a collaboration that went so well. So, and we have had a few collaborating authors together, and it seems like a really fun process. So, okay. And I have to ask this because it's on your bio, and it is, you are the only 3-time Jeopardy champion I have ever had on the show. So tell us about that.
Wow. I was always a Jeopardy fanatic, watching it for years, and kept, one of those people that just sat on my couch shouting out the responses. Like, I could beat this guy, I could beat that guy. And then I finally thought, well, why am I just sitting here like telling myself that? And so at the end of the show, they always say, if you want to be a contestant on Jeopardy, at the time it said call this number. So I did. And I went down and did an audition in Los Angeles. You have to take a test to see if you have all the pop culture trivia and the history knowledge that they might be covering. Then you play a practice game, and then they say, we'll call you if we're interested in having you on the show. And they did. So it was absolutely humongous fun, just absolutely terrific. So I could have just kept going. Well, I would never have stopped if they had let me. It was, I think I might be a little competitive, but it was.
Well, I mean, I would have been so nervous. Like, I just would have been up there terrified and frozen. But you probably
that was what I was worried was going to happen. I said, no matter what happens, don't let me freeze and like just stand there with my mouth hanging open and nothing coming out. So, and I think I was nervous beforehand, but once the game started, once they said, this is Jeopardy, and they show you the board with the categories, and you're like, okay, let's do this. And then the nervousness went away because you're just there with people you've, spent the day with, basically getting a chance to know a little bit the other contestants, and you're all just into it. And it's just, it was just a lot of fun. And I do have one brag.
Yes.
That, my daughter is also a Jeopardy champion now.
Oh my God, I love that. It runs in the family. She must have been sitting there in her high chair while you were shouting out.
She was. She was.
That's so fun. Well, congratulations to your daughter too. That's so exciting. So tell us, I know I always hate when people ask this question, because it's like asking a college graduate what they're going to do, because you've just had this incredible success with Heat 2, and you have this fabulous, really fabulous book 4. So, but we have to ask, because we all want to know, what is Meg Gardiner working on now?
A standalone thriller with some international intrigue. That's as much as I can tell you.
That's fair. Yeah, we don't want to be killed by asking too many questions, but well, that is super exciting, Meg. So tell our listeners where to find you. Like, where do we find out all the information we want to know about Meg? I know you're on Instagram, but can you give everybody your handles?
I can. I am on Instagram at Meg Gardiner 1, MEGGARDINER numeral 1. Same on Twitter/X. I'm on Facebook at Meg Gardiner Books. My website is meggardiner.com, and you can find me around. I love to talk about books and writing and what everybody else is interested in. Tacos, movies. Pets,
exactly. Whatever. I'll talk about anything. Exactly. Especially if I have a deadline. I'm up for talking all the time when I have a deadline.
Exactly. When I'm not cleaning the house, when I have a deadline.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Well, Meg, I just love Shadowheart. I love this series. I love Caitlin and her grit, and also her insecurities and her authenticity. She feels like a real, a fully formed human. And I love that about the way you write your books. And I haven't read Heat 2 yet, I have to admit, but it's definitely on my list. So I will check that out before the movie comes out, hopefully. And thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Everybody, this is Killer Women with Meg Gardiner, #1 New York Times bestseller, Edgar Award winner, Barry Award winner, Jeopardy champion. It was so fun to talk to you today. Look for Shadowheart, such a good book. And if you haven't started the series, start with Unsub. You won't be sorry. And we will see you next time. Bye.